Okay, well, good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and I'm here with another of our virtual events. And tonight, we're all very excited to welcome Alma Katsu back to us, albeit virtually. And I know you can't see the color well, but you can see it better behind Alma in the picture. But we do have just a handful of signed copies of her new book, Red Widow, which is getting all kinds of great raves everywhere. Let's see here. I don't have a copy of Michael Koryta's new book, unfortunately, because we sold out. We had signed copies, but we are going to be getting some more.
Product placement. Thank you.
That's all right. Alma has a copy. She's held up, so we're in good shape.
Okay. Never Far Away is the title. And also, I just wanted to give a little advance plug for the new Mystery Writers of America anthology that Michael edited called When a Stranger Comes to Town, which I haven't seen a copy. Barbara probably has. No. It looks like a stellar.
I haven't either.
You haven't either?
I've read the stories and I can speak highly of them.
Yeah, it looks amazing. But anyway, everybody watching on Facebook, I'm going to be lurking in the back, monitoring the Facebook comments and questions. So if you have any comments or questions for Alma or Michael or Barbara for that matter, just put them in the comments field and I'll mysteriously appear about 40 minutes into the program. So Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. You can tell, excuse me, by the strange color that Patrick looks like he's going to emerge from a crypt, which might be actually wonderful. And I understand that today is National Puppy Day, and indeed, my resident puppy, who's wearing her orange collar of shame, the one she wears when she might bark, may wander through and blow up this event. I can't do much about it today. So anyway, Alma, congratulations. Today is publication day for Red Widow. So wonderful. A toast to you. And I wanted to mention, I don't know why I have this frog in my throat, sorry, that Michael Koryta, stay tuned, because following today's program at 6:15 Pacific Daylight Time, Michael and I will be talking to Dean Koontz. And then Michael will be back on April 26th with the MWA anthology that Patrick mentioned, right before Lee Child and Laurie King talk about the MWA handbook that's come out. So a double MWA event.
I'm like evening news to Johnny Carson, on to Letterman. You can't get rid of me.
Oh, I love it. Michael was a Poison Pen writer of residence, and we've made him pay for it ever since by doing all these events. In any case, Alma, you had the most wonderful review in the New York Times, which I snagged. It came by my way Sunday. And for anybody who hasn't read it, I'll just do a little, but then Michael's going to take over and do an intelligent program instead of all my ad lib stuff here. There's some heavy irony at work in Red Widow. As one of its leads, the CIA agent Lindsay Duncan, known by colleagues as, quote, the human lie detector. Polygraphs are so inaccurate that many courts won't admit them as evidence, but their continued use by intelligence division is a metaphor for the lack of trust inherent in this work, a metaphor Alma Katsu employs in sly fashion. Michael will go into Alma's professional credentials for writing this, but I have to say, Alma, when I read it, I was certainly struck with John le Carre, certainly his most famous book, or at least in my opinion, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. There are a lot of similar issues, and yet think how long it's been since that Cold War inspired novel published.
Yeah, it's really baked into the field. You know, it's a funny irony, right? Because it's all about trust and that sort of thing, but it's a double-edged sword. Well, I don't know how much you want to get into this now and talk about the business, but yeah. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I was turning it over to Michael, but I just wanted to make that observation when I've been talking to people about it. And one of the reasons we're virtually out of the copies you so kindly signed for us is the Carre link. But, you know, there are other, Jason Matthews, I'm trying to remember if he had as much, Alex Berenson had some, there are a whole lot of people who have really dealt. I love the spy genre. I suppose Joseph Cannon is maybe one of the most prestigious of those currently writing. Alan First also. And Joe and I have done all of his books together, so I'm pretty well steeped in all that. But of course, he came to it as an editor from Doubleday, not from an actual employee at the CIA. So I think fiction has a lot to do with it. Anyway, Michael, over to you.
This is the perfect time for me to leap in with a completely unanticipated question. and ask about your background. But I'm more curious. What year was your first book published?
2011.
2011. Okay. So you spent 30 plus years working for the CIA, working in intelligence circles.
Yes.
Yes. And
Sorry.
it took you a decade of publishing before you decided to really utilize that background. So I'm curious if you can explain, was there some sort of legal blackout or just an emotional blackout?
Yeah, probably the emotional blackout. You know, what can I say? I guess when it came to writing stories, I just kind of gravitated naturally towards ones that were like more fantastical, you know, God only knows why, a carryover, I guess, from childhood. But during, you know, it took me 10 years to write that first book, The Taker. And during that time, I did try to write, you know, spy novels, but they were, maybe I shouldn't say this, the publisher probably wouldn't like me to admit it, but they weren't that good. And I think for a lot of reasons. One is when you work in the business, you're very conscious about what your peers think of the field, right? You know, spy novels and spy movies and that kind of stuff. And, you know, as I became more mature as a writer, I understood then, you know, the difference. And I think hopefully how to kind of square that difference, right? The intelligence business is very different from what readers' expectations are, I think, especially modern readers' expectations are in these types of books and films. You know, they want the drama, they want the cliffhangers, they want the, you know, twists and turns. But in the intelligence business, you know, if you had a situation where it was down to a lone agent, you know, to go running into a room, find the bomb, throw it out the window, and he's the only guy who can do it, and, you know, beat up the bad guy single-handedly, we would actually call that an intelligence failure. Because if your program was good, if the ops were right, you wouldn't get to that position where it's, you know, this, you know, all out do or die thing. But that's kind of expected by modern readers. So how do you, as an intelligence professional who, you can't help it, you just have this kind of voice in the back of your head that they're going to laugh at you, right? How do you square that circle? So that's what I kind of had to come to, and I hope I did it well in Red Widow.
I'm curious how many early readers you have who are peers from that world. Did
None.
you hold it pretty close to the vest, or?
I don't let them read it because, you know, I love them very much. I have a lot of friends still, folks that are still in the business, a lot who retired. A lot of them review spy books, both fiction and nonfiction, for various intelligence publications. And I understand their point, but they're not, you know, they don't sell commercial fiction. They're not on that side of the business. And sometimes they can be a little intolerant of the things that you and I as writers have to do in order to keep modern readers entertained. So no, I don't share it with them. And I know I'm already getting emails from them about how they're disappointed I didn't do this or that. I also need to remind them that it has to get through the pre-publication review board. So I can't tell actual secrets in the book.
See, that's interesting. When I worked as a private investigator for a few years, and PIs seem to love PI fiction. And they don't expect anything to track with the reality of the business. But it was interesting to me how many of them really just love the genre and immerse in that. So I was curious if it was the same in your world, or it sounds a little bit more, the verisimilitude seems pretty serious there.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hear that PIs have such a good sense of humor and are realistic.
Well, we also really don't have any rules. So, you know, there's nothing to break.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll change a little bit. There's certainly a lot more people in intelligence writing books these days, getting contracts, especially in fiction. So for instance, yesterday I did an event with Karen Cleveland, who's also former agency. Her first book, Need to Know, was a bestseller, excellent book. there's been some other. Mark Henshaw was a presidential daily briefer. He wrote a novel, I think. No, he was Red Cell. Sorry, he was with the Red Cell, which is like alternative scenarios, like, you know, when you're trying to think outside the box kind of thing. And there's one coming up, and I cannot remember the gentleman's name, but it's Damascus Station is coming out in a few months, and that's also, he's also former CIA.
So when you talk about these writers who are former CIA and just in general, you mentioned Karen, but is it a male-dominated world, or is that more of a fictional portrait? Because you have two female protagonists here engaged in this sort of cat and mouse narrative, which is excellent. But I'm curious if you experienced a male-dominated profession, or if that wasn't the case.
So I've had a very long career, and I'm happy to say it's changed quite a bit over time. And it's a little different at every agency. Every agency has their own culture. So some are worse than others. The ones that are Defense Department based, and I spent a lot of time in Defense Department agencies, you know, because they're from the military, I think they do tend to be a little bit still, you know, kind of chauvinistic. CIA, of the ones that I worked with, is probably the best. But these biases that have existed for a long time continue to exist, you know, biases in favor of men, for instance. And I don't know how many stories you'd like me to get into. Somebody earlier today pried a really good one at me.
Well, I want to hear a good one. I mean, we don't need to go by quantity, but let's have quality at least. Give us a good one.
So, you know, well, first of all, I just want to say, for the guys who are listening, please, you know, don't take it as sour grapes or something. But, you know, my profession is intelligence analyst. I also worked at RAND, the assessment people. So I'm trained to assess, right? To try to be objective and do assessments. And I have to say, this is sort of my neutral observation. This isn't just an upset woman, right? My last position was with NSA before I retired. And I was a deputy office director, which is fairly senior. I had about 200 people working for me. Me and another person, a guy, we were the heads of the organization, and we had 3 executive leadership teams underneath us. And there was only one other woman. And I was speaking with her one day, just kind of getting to know her. And she said these words that that just really struck me at like how things don't change. She was saying how, and again, remember, I'm her boss and I'm a woman. And she says to me, I've never had a good woman manager at NSA. All women manager are terrible. The worst man manager is better than the best woman manager. And what struck me is, those are the exact same words I heard when I started 35 years ago. When you hear something like that, you're not hearing the truth. You're hearing a religion. You're hearing a myth that's been carried through an organization. They hear it when they walk in the door before they realize and they can be objective, and it just carries around in their head. And that's when I realized things have changed, but maybe not changed so much. And that's one reason why I wanted to write Red Widow, because, you know, I do like a lot of spy fiction and spy movies and all that kind of stuff. But I've often felt that, yes, it is the you know, fiction side of it is still dominated by men, especially when it comes to contemporary fiction. You know, there's certainly plenty of historical fiction that deals with women,
right,
you know, having what are often sort of one-off exceptional experiences, right? But the reality today is about half of the workforce is female. There's a lot of them in very, very senior positions and have had, you know, done groundbreaking work in many fields. And I just didn't feel like the fiction was representing those women. And so I wanted to write a book that showed women not as sidekicks or, you know, as the gal who's being allowed to participate in a man's world, but as an exceptional professional, and you know, and see how she does her job. And so that's what I wanted to do with this. You know, and I'm sure we might get into this. The book was picked up by Fox for TV. They're developing a TV series. And one of the things they said that they really liked about it was, even though you have these 2 main characters who are women, who are often in an adversarial position and sometimes doing very bad things, they're not bad people. They're doing them for the right reason. They really believe in what they're doing. And that is really the truest representation I could give you of the people who work in the intelligence community, especially at CIA. You often do have to, you know, kind of duke things out, but it's not, you don't get it from like the petty side of things, right? I mean, people really believe.
Tell me a little bit about that sense of loyalty. Is the loyalty to the agency, to the mission, to the bigger idea of the country? When you talk about these ideas of loyalty and betrayal, give me some examples on that.
Well, I'll tell you, that's probably the most heartbreaking thing. You know, the people who work in the intelligence community are, and I've worked with a lot of them, they're quite exceptional. Okay, not every single one of them, but most of them are exceptional. They're very intelligent people. They're very devoted to all those things you said, devoted to duty, devoted to mission. They're devoted to the idea of serving the American people. I mean, you don't walk in there thinking I'm serving the president. You think I'm serving the American people. And, you know, a lot of them could make a lot more money elsewhere. Some do after they retire, but, you know, they're really dedicated to the job and to the mission. The intelligence, working in intelligence is an interesting thing because there is a huge imbalance of power between the agencies. These are very, very powerful agencies with rules and mandates that are stacked in their favor, right? For a very good reason. They're trying to protect important secrets. And the individual person has very little power. I mean, you give up everything when you go to work in intelligence. You have to fill out yearly financial disclosure forms so they can count every penny you make. Because usually when somebody becomes a traitor, they do it for financial reasons. So they monitor you.
I'm not going to make a Trump joke. I'm not going to make a Trump joke.
Yeah. You know, they monitor your communications inside the building. It's very invasive. And of course, we all understand why, and we agree with it. But that's an incredible imbalance of power, right? So imagine if you find out everything you're sacrificing and you find out one day that the agency you work for, you know, is not keeping your best interests at heart, as a matter of fact, that maybe they've done something that, you know, really just is your life, your family, your everything, right? Imagine how betrayed you'd feel. Well, that's kind of what's at the heart of Red Widow. And the other thing, which I know has kind of come out a little bit, the biggest betrayal of all that's in that book is based on a true story, actually. It's really hidden because it's famous. If you were to know what it was, you'd recognize it because it was in the newspaper every day for a very long time, but its association with the agency has never been made public. So that was actually the kernel when I talked to my editor and she said, you know, maybe you should write a spy novel. And I knew right away the case that I would write about. And it was just a matter of whether or not I'd be able to get it through the PRD.
Pass the review.
Michael, can I interrupt for just 1 second? Because I wanted to go back to what Alma was talking about why the movie people are so interested in Red Widow. And this is the last sentence of the New York Times book review, but it's really on point. It says the plotting of Red Widow is sophisticated and laced with surprises, but what stands out most is the emotional core of Lindsay and Teresa's alliance and whether there is room in a nest of vipers for true sisterhood. And I think that's an important part of the book too, is that because they are two women surrounded by other women and lots of men and so forth, is it possible to achieve any kind of a bond, one in the agency, one not?
Thank you for bringing that up again. That was like a very important point to me when you hear, you know, like that comment that I told you that my subordinate actually said to me, her boss. You know, sometimes
we were so focused on the serious element of that just kind of slid right under the radar that you were the boss in that exchange. But
right, and I'm a woman, and I remember staring at her like thinking, do you want to take that back? But she didn't, so I guess she wasn't too impressed with me. But you know, part of that myth is that women can't get along, women fight each other, we're catty, we're backstabbers. And I have to say that hasn't been the case in my experience in 35 years at various agencies. You know, some of my best friends were made working at these places. They've supported me all these years and, you know, I'll support them. One of them is running for Senate, so I'll be supporting her. you know, it's just, you meet such extraordinary people and such extraordinary women. And, you know, I'm a little worried about this because, like I had brought up before, it's a very male dominated, you know, a lot of the readers of spy thrillers are men. And I just really hope that this book is able to find its audience. You know, if I think there's a lot of women readers that if they give it a chance, even though it's a spy novel, I think they'll find a lot there for them.
I'm glad you bring up that idea of different audiences for different books, because you and I share what I call genre attention disorder. A bookseller or a publisher would shorten that to GAD, as in EGADS. How are we going to keep selling this person? They don't know what they want to do.
Wait, don't you dare block on it. Don't you dare block on all booksellers.
Barbara. Obviously, there are outliers.
Right.
But
How about exceptions? I like that better.
exceptions, yes.
All right.
But there is some pressure within the business to deliver something consistently. And when you and I met, I guess didn't meet in person, but began to communicate, it was after I read The Hunger. And I remember I heard it referenced on Morning Edition. They were running through the best horror novels of the year, I think. And there was a reference to the Donner Party, but with a supernatural twist. And I thought, okay, the Donner Party is one of the most horrific things I can imagine on its own. So anyone who layers in something supernatural to that really has my attention. And I read that book, absolutely loved it. And that's when you and I began to communicate. But at that point, I had no idea you had this background in intelligence. So I wasn't surprised that you weren't writing spy novels. Once I learned the background, I think, well, why isn't she doing this? So can you explain that? I mean, you've moved around from historical to supernatural to now spy. I mean, you're all over the place, which I love, but.
I know something's going to happen, right? Like it's a tough thing to sustain. And when I was looking around for sort of role models where I could understand, like, how do they do that? How do they juggle multiple audiences? How do they market themselves? There's not a lot of them around. I mean, you have written pretty diverse books in terms of, you know, feel and everything, but they probably belong more or less in a big pen. I honestly have no idea what's going to happen. We couldn't even figure out how to do my website so that it looked coherent, right? With the different kinds of books. I guess we'll see. Putnam just bought my second book in the Red Widow series. So there'll be a second one. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And so who knows? Then there's another historical horror coming out next spring, The Fervor, which is based on, it's set in World War II. It has to do with the Japanese internment and these fire balloons that Japan actually sent over towards the end of the war. So, you know, but it's really more about, you know, pitting Americans versus Americans, and a lot of flavor of what we're going through right now, unfortunately. Honestly, though, I don't know what's going to happen. I hope, so far the indications are that a lot of my, you know, really supportive readers have said, no problem, I'll read your spy novel. You know, and for that, I'm super, super grateful. I really wonder how it's going to work. Like, if people who just see the spy novel and then they find out I write horror fiction, they're going to think, well, there's something wrong with that woman. I'm not going to read it.
I'm curious for Barbara's take on this as a bookseller and publisher, but I'll just share very briefly. One of the earliest bits of advice I received from anyone in this business was from Dennis Lehane. And it wasn't with regard to genre hopping so much as just overall approach. He said, you need to believe that cream rises. And if you write good stuff that you care about, it will find an audience. And I think you are right now perfect evidence that that is true. You're writing the story that makes your heart beat a little faster, and the reader responds to your passion, your enthusiasm, your craft. And you're going to continue to see the results of that. That is what I believe. Barbara?
Well, I'm going to start out by reminding everybody, because nobody thinks of this, that Rex Stout wrote 49 books before he wrote the first Neurowolf book. It's
Exactly.
never too late, you know, to follow your passion. We spend all our time at the Poison Pen knocking down genres. We file everything in one file called fiction. We don't care about labels. We care about writing. We care about enthusiasm for the story. We care about the emotional hearts of the books and the characters. And so far, we've done really well selling books with that approach. Unfortunately, in a world dominated by algorithms and so forth, it's much harder to escape the label question. And, Alma, you may very well find your books in different parts of stores, because they're going to be over here in horror, and then the spy story, where's that go? And so your body of work, not at the Poison Pen, but
I had
in
that
other
experience.
places may be fragmented. I mean, Michael gives me a problem. Do I put his Scott Carson book with Michael Koryta and put a label on the cover, or do I file it separately? Because you've actually changed your name, Michael, in order to distinguish, just like Ruth Rendell did, or Elizabeth Peters, Barbara Michaels, whose real name was Barbara Mertz, did. So there are different ways to handle it. It wouldn't have made sense for you, Alma, to write Red Widow under a pseudonym, because who you are is an important part of the book. If you were pressing it, you would have gone back and written your other books under a different name, but it's too late now.
The CIA might actually have preferred that she go the route of the pseudonym and not bring up any of that background.
Well, it's really hard for me to generalize. I mean, our store is so specific; it's a universe of its own. It's really, and I think many bookstores, most bookstores, probably independent bookstores, are like that. It's a fusion of the staff and the community, because different communities. I mean, you can't make headway in some communities with certain kinds of books, and then part of community is customers. So because we have such an national and international customer base, and it's equally divided between men and women. I mean, some bookstores are like all women or whatever. So, we can stay generalists. And I think you should just pursue that, idea that as long as it's a good book, it doesn't matter what kind of book it is. I hate it when people come into the store and say things like, I only read books by women, or the obverse, only read books by men, or I'm not willing to read science fiction or something. And that is all what prompted us to just have one file for fiction. And, that way they're browsing along, and who knows, despite this aversion, they may stumble upon something that, that appeals to them. So you can't control any of that, it's just, there it is. The movie, if indeed Hollywood comes through for you, the movie will wash right over an awful lot of this. And
That's what I'm hoping for.
It's a TV series, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm sorry?
It's a TV series, right?
Yes. Yeah. What a huge surprise. You guys are so much more familiar with all this. This is, The Hunger had been optioned by Ridley Scott, but I was very removed from that for various reasons. So I didn't really get up close with any of that process at all. But for this one, I had said to my agents that, I'd like to have a production role. I'd like to be more involved. So they fought for that. And the negotiations have actually been going on since like July or August. It was very slow. I talked to some movie people first, and then some TV people, and the Fox people were very excited about it. But it took forever. And when I asked folks later, they say, well, first of all, it does take forever. But second of all, that with the pandemic and Hollywood, like last summer, they had no idea. They could not predict the future. So they weren't in a rush, apparently, to be signing up things. So I found out that it was actually a little bit of a miracle that we sold the series at all.
But it also speaks to the quality of the book. I mean, It was a tough selling environment without question. But I'm not surprised that you found a home for it, because it's that kind of power.
Well, thank you. I think also the sort of current awareness of, of women's issues and that sort of thing kind of helped, that there was just more of an appetite for a story that really is being told from the perspective of two women. So they brought on just an excellent executive producer, Sarah Condon. She was with HBO for a long time, and now she produces a lot of series. And she really has just been so accepting. I mean, first of all, she explains everything to me, which is wonderful. And, her patience is amazing. And, she understands that I kind of want to learn the business. Now, they're not going to go so far as to let me write anything, but I'm getting to at least, see what's going on. And you're laughing. You've written screenplays, right?
I was just going to say, even if they hire you to write something, you won't feel as if they went so far as to let you write something. You
really
might be able to affect more as the EP removed than the screenwriter.
I understand. Writers are like the bottom
I was
rung.
just going to say, Alma, that it occurs to me in this discussion that probably the best way to talk about this book is in terms of a very big thing going on right now, which is women having agency. It really doesn't matter if they're working in the CIA. They could be working in a law firm. They could be working on Wall Street. What you're really writing about is two women having agency, whatever that means, power, whatever. And that probably is what affects Hollywood in terms of casting, the two women will be crucial. But why don't you talk about your book that way instead of saying it's a spy story? Because it's really not in that. I mean, it is, but that's the background. That's the background for what you are writing about, was just these two women having agency.
And I'm as I discuss the book, I'm starting to shift a little bit that way. But you know how it is, it's sort of hard to know how do you market a book that sort of crosses lines. I had the same problem with The Hunger and the Deep. That first book, The Hunger, I don't think the publisher thought of it as a horror novel at all. They thought of it more as a thriller. They were a little worried, concerned, I should say, about it being seen just as strictly historical fiction. So, when you've got a book that sort of crosses and blurs a lot of lines, it's a little bit hard to know how do you craft the pitch, because you don't want to leave out potential audiences. And originally, I have to say, I was a little concerned about emphasizing that it's so much a women's story, because again, spy fiction is pretty much a male dominated market, both in terms of readers and everything. I didn't want to alienate those readers. And I guess only time will tell, right? Who buys the books, who it resonates with. Got any wise words there, Michael?
I was just going to say, don't count out your male readers. I understand the business idea is concern there, but I feel like we have been counting out male fiction readers across the board for far too long, and they show up and read a little bit wider than most people probably expect.
I want to mind at all with this book, because it's got a female, it's driven, female protagonist driven.
Did it cross my mind in terms of would I lose male readers?
Or how your male readers would feel about it? I mean, do you feel like the majority of your readers are male?
No, no.
Okay.
I would say probably 2/3 female at least, but that's how it's always been. I think if you go back and survey American readers for the last 200 years, you're going to find most novels are read by women. But it doesn't enter my mind so much now. I think if that had been my third book, probably. At this stage, I've heard every demographic study and every trend and every concern. And I feel like my only job is to stay in the ring and keep taking punches. And it's about endurance, and it's about, writing what you want. So I was very interested that you mentioned you just sold the second book. So you are coming back to this terrain. Is that what you're working on now, or is that one already in the can?
No, I've got to get started. It's I don't know how much inside baseball the people who watch these events want to hear. It was originally one story, like just a real continuation of what happened in Red Widow. And then I kind of got the advice that, well, maybe you want to step back from that, even though it's some of the same characters, but it could almost be a standalone. And then things happen in the news that makes the publisher like a little nervous about doing that story. So I came up with another story that they loved, and that's the one they picked up. So, the thing I love about these books is they're relatively easy for me to write. It's just second nature. I can come up with the problem, put the characters in it. I know what the range of options are going to be in front of them. It's so much easier than having to research 2,300 people on the Titanic. Yeah.
The depth of research you put into The Hunger and the Deep to me, it's extraordinary. I'm in awe of anyone who can synthesize that much information, get it right, make it compelling, and keep the characters, front and center and the emotional heart of it. So I was curious actually if you found slipping into this familiar world was an easier gear. Did it free you up? Not easier. Did it free you up in terms of less stress about, am I getting everything right? Because you know damn well you are.
I gotta say, yes, it was. It really is quite a bit of a relief, and that sort of frees you up in other ways to try to think creatively. Like, as you know, when your editor, does a pass through and they come back with notes and they want this changed and that changed, and at first glance, it might seem like it's going to be a deal breaker, right? For the hunger of the deep, I would have sweated it for days. Now, they can give me something, and I'm like, okay, this is how we're going to change. So much easier. Yeah, so much easier.
Teed up.
Yeah, I have to say, 30 years of being an intelligence analyst, which is basically a research analyst. And I've done some huge projects. I've done huge projects for RAND and for CIA. That made the research part of those books not as daunting as they some people might have felt. It's interesting, when I got on tour after those books, somebody would always come up to me at the end of a show and say, I want to write historical fiction, but I'm terrified of it. I don't know how to organize my notes or anything like that. And I realized a lot of people kind of stopped writing research papers after high school or college, but I've been doing it for 30 years. So, it's not as scary, but I can see where it could be. The Titanic, I did kind of pause and go, do I really want to write a book about the Titanic? Because first of all, the amount of reference material out there is staggering.
And you have your people, that's their baby too.
I thought they'd be coming after me with bats, with nails, stuck in them, because I fictionalized so much of, and some people really did take offense, but.
So I'm curious, you've mentioned a few times you were working in this community for 30 years. And that makes me intrigued by what the recruiting process was like. Where were you in life, and when did you begin to actually think, okay, this is real. This is a possibility I want to pursue.
Even after I'd been working in it for years, it didn't seem real. So, I'm old, and back then when they recruited, especially the agency I started with, which is NSA, which is an extremely technical agency. You just can't work. I used to joke, you can't even clean the bathrooms there without understanding computer science. So there weren't that many people getting pumped out of degree programs in the degrees they needed. So they tested you for aptitude. So somebody had told me about the testing procedure. I lived in Boston. I didn't know these agencies, and it just sounded so wacky. I thought, well, this is, I want to be a writer. This will be an interesting experience. I'll just take it for the experience, and that's it. I was working as a newspaper reporter and doing public relations at the time in Boston. So I did their tests and everything. It was like a several day ordeal you go through. And after a while, they came back and they said, you tested really well. We want to offer you a job. And I thought, I'm not moving to Washington. It takes like at least a year for the security, background investigations and stuff. So I said, go ahead and start the paperwork, but I'd be really surprised if I ended up taking the job. And they were like, oh, sure. They know they got you. They're going to offer you that job and you're going to take it. Well, at that time, right around the time they came back and they said, we're ready to bring you on board, it was a huge economic depression and people were losing jobs left and right. And I was working for education at the time, and the school thought they were going to lose all their funding, and I was sure they were going to cut my job. So I said, okay, I'll come. But, I'll only stay for a few years. I'm just coming down for the experience of what it's like. And they were like, yeah, they know. And I stayed for 35 years. It's a fascinating job. I did things that I never would have imagined it was possible for me to do. I mean, among other things, I was an English major. I was not good at math or science. And here I was going to work for NSA, where you have to get good at math and science really fast. And I was amazed at what I could learn. So the last 10 years of my career, and I still do it a little bit now, I'm in emerging technology. I was actually the director of a research lab for the Defense Department. And did very, very early work in data analytics for social media. So I'm still a social media researcher. And all that is due to NSA, you know, teaching me what I needed to learn. That's what you get from the intelligence community. The opportunities are endless. You don't know what you can do as a person, really.
When, after 35 years of having an active role in world affairs and feeling like a player in the, you know, whatever your project of the moment was, you know that you are having an active role. What was it like, for example, last year? You know, we are all in passive mode, but there's everything going on. I mean, is it very difficult to sit back and think, I'm writing a book and that's not, do you think that's not important enough anymore?
Oh, no, because I mean, don't get me wrong. I really value the contributions that I was allowed to make, but it's not all, you know, it doesn't all go your way. You lose a lot of cases, and social media is an example. I hope I'm not telling any tales out of school. You know, the government's ability to analyze social media is still years behind the private sector. And it's been this way from the get-go. It's a very difficult thing for the intelligence community to want to move ahead in, because there's so many concerns, right? With existing privacy laws and regulations, the mandates of the intelligence communities are very constrained, and it's very hard to get leadership to really push through that in order to enable the intelligence community to do a good job. So for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been involved in a lot of disinformation analysis of disinformation campaigns, and I work with social media researchers, the top in the field, and they support a lot of government initiatives. Like some of them supported the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence that was looking into Russian disinformation campaigns during the 2016 elections. And it was very disheartening, but not the first time I had felt this way, when you can't, even with the body of evidence that we had, you could not get the policymaker side to have the political will to do what you knew needed to happen, right? And so after the administration changed, I was very tempted to throw my hat back in the ring, because I knew now there's the appetite. They understand that this is very serious, and the intelligence community has to change, and we have to get better at analyzing social media and also at data analytics in general. And I thought, this is my last chance to really make a difference. I could ask to be put back in and, you know, pull resources together. And I thought, holy crap, Alma, how many times do you have to learn this lesson? You know, you're going to die running your head into the barn door over and over again. Just enjoy your life. You've done your time. You know, Putnam was nice enough to publish this book, which I've always wanted to write. Fox was nice enough to want to make a TV show out of it. Just enjoy yourself.
But I think what you're demonstrating there is exactly what is so magical about the narrative, which is how much you care. And your characters have that same drive and passion, and that comes through to the reader. That's what makes it so compelling for us. If you didn't care as much as you just demonstrated, I don't think you'd be able to put it on the page.
Well, you know, what's interesting is almost everybody I worked with is like that.
Okay, so actually, you're guiding me to my next question. The book is dedicated to, I think it's an Anthony Alcott.
Yep.
And I was just curious. It's a very kind dedication. So the name meant nothing to me, of course. I put it into Google, and I'm reading about this guy who's a PhD from Stanford and worked at the DNI and is very much of your breed. So if you're comfortable with it, I was curious if you wanted to say a little bit about who he was and what he meant to you.
So Tony passed away, so I can probably talk a little bit about him. Tony Alcott was a Russian specialist, and our careers started overlapping about 15 years ago. He had been the senior analyst in a program, and it was in the beginning of social media research, and he was moving out, and they hired me, so we overlapped there, and that's how we met. And then I went on to work at a think tank at CIA, and they ended up bringing him in after he retired. So our careers kept overlapping. And, you know, we joke a lot that you become a lot like your targets. So Tony became like this Russian bear, right? Like not only does he have all of Russian history and political science at his fingertips, but he acted like a Russian too. So, I just loved him. And he wrote novels. He actually wrote a couple novels that were, I think they came out in like the 1990s. And so they were very peculiar to the Soviet Union at the time, but they were like mystery novels and they were great. We just had so much in common. And I was doing a residency a couple years ago, artist residency in Iceland, when I got contacted and had been told that Tony had had a massive stroke and he ended up passing away very shortly afterwards. So I just couldn't think of anybody else. I made him the senior director of Russian affairs at the National Security Council in the book. You'll see his name go by in passing. That's a huge promotion, but I kind of felt like he deserved it. So yeah, that's I'm really grateful for that. Really happy. We a lot of my closest friends were his close friends too, and I think they're very happy that we're able to still remember Tony.
That's fantastic. When I saw that he wrote fiction too, I was just intrigued. And actually, my first question was, is this one of her other identities? And she's always existed under this name, but the timeline didn't really track for that.
No.
I want to make sure, I know we're probably pushing your time here.
Well, we probably do need to get questions from the audience, but do you have anything else you'd particularly like to ask?
I'll take questions from the audience and then maybe see.
All right, we'll call Patrick up. We'll summon him from out of the crypt. There he is.
There he is.
Yeah. This has been a great conversation. I've got some really interesting questions for you, Alma. Let's start with Larry, our own Larry Siegel, Barbara. He has a couple of really good questions. And one of them is, are Lindsay's comments about lying and liars accurate? 90 in the book, I guess it says 90% of all people will lie consistently. Average person tells 3 lies every 10 minutes. And she can predict lying with a greater accuracy than a polygraph.
Well, to predict lying accuracy greater than a polygraph is not actually a big trick, unfortunately. What Sarah said in the review, I had to laugh because she's dead on. A lot of courts won't accept polygraphs as evidence, but when you have a security clearance, not only do you have to go through a battery of polygraphs in order to get the clearance, every few years you have to go through polygraphs again. And as you progress in your career, you'd think that as you do more, it gets easier, but you really get to hate them till at the end where you just can't wait to retire, so you don't have to take a polygraph again. Yeah, the whole behavioral analysis thing was a little was tricky because it's not an exact science. I wouldn't say it's as far as voodoo. So for instance, at CIA, I was not a case officer, but everybody learns a little bit of it. For instance, I was a recruiter for a year. And I went to universities, mostly in the Northeast. And you get approached by all kinds of people at recruitment fairs. And you hope this doesn't upset anybody. You get approached by a lot of foreign students. And foreign students are perfectly fine, but in order to have a position at an agency with a security clearance, you have to be a US citizen. So, we talk them through this, but you also may be approached by people who maybe want information from you for not the stated purposes, right? That they're trying to get something else out of you. So we all get a little bit of training in behavioral analysis. And the first thing they tell you is the things they're going to show you to look for, you can't just use them at face value, right? You have to establish a baseline, a person's baseline behaviors, and then look for deviations. But this is all very complicated and it's really hard to convey quickly as an aside in a novel. So I didn't go into the behavioral analysis part maybe as much as I should. But yeah, it's a little disappointing how often people will actually lie.
And a lot of them are just teeny tiny lies to try to make themselves look better, or position, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Or just, but when you run up against a pathological liar, and I don't know how many of you have in your life, it's really an unnerving thing, I have to say.
That made you more conscious of the little white lies that might slip out of your mouth?
That's kind of the double-edged sword of being in intelligence. We all have, we're trained to have expectations for this very high degree of candor at the agency, in divulging truths about yourself to the agency. in dealing with your peers and dealing with your management. But then you have to deceive the rest of the world about who you are and what your job is. And, you know, at some agencies like CIA, where human intelligence is part and parcel of the job, I think people handle a little better. At NSA, those people, oh my God, so many of them can't lie to save their lives. And they've got to go out and kind of try to, you know, protect their identity from the rest of the world. It's kind of funny. So actually being at CIA made me more aware of, like, just when wanting to deceive when that was about to come out of my mouth. But you just learn to smooth over it better.
Once had to give an interview for a candidate for the NSA, and you know, they interview you if you had professional interaction. And my house was undergoing construction at the time, and the interviewer said, "Well, we can't meet anywhere else. This has to be recorded. It has to be private." So I'm like, "Okay, well, I have this one room that's we can kind of escape to." And I had a 15-year-old cat who was very loud and obnoxious. And so the cat's clawing at the door. He's driving the guy nuts, driving me nuts. So I end up bringing the cat in. And while he's interviewing me, he's asking these questions about, did you ever perceive any, level of hostility toward the country, so on and so forth. I'm literally stroking this cat like a Bond villain and, musing about this guy's honesty. It's a unique experience. I haven't put it in a book yet, but I need to.
You should. That's hysterical.
Did you have a monocle that you could put on while you were doing
The only thing I was lacking.
Let's see. Arlene has some questions. She says, what is the most inspiring and most challenging aspect of writing this particular book, Red Widow? And 2, what have you learned about yourself while writing the book? There are a couple more, but we'll stop with those questions.
Well, the most inspiring thing is the people I've worked with, that I really wanted to try to be as fair to them as I possibly could in the book, portraying what it means to work in intelligence. And I'm sorry, I missed the other part of that.
Let's see. Okay, so that was
my brain is just shrinking.
What have you learned about yourself while writing the book?
Oh, well, I kind of regret that I didn't do more action-packed things. One of, being a SIGINT analyst, you learn a lot of stuff, but you don't run around with guns very much, which is why whenever I see an NSA person portrayed in a TV show or movie running with guns, I laugh myself sick because I know they would just shoot themselves. But I didn't get a lot of that. I did have some incredible experiences. Like I was with foreign liaison in a very romantic Eastern European country, and I was convinced they were going to try to turn me, and they took me up to this hill, where they had the old Soviet monuments, and we're looking down on the lit up city below, and the wind's whipping at his trench coat, and I'm standing there. I'm like, he's going to try to turn me. He's going to try to turn me. No, not at all. Then we got in the car and he drove me back to the hotel. And then one of the jobs I had was in the office that I call the real Mission Impossible. And it's the people who do cover. And it is so involved. It's amazing. But I'm glad I had that experience, because that was like, I felt like now I had a real spy experience.
Our friend Robin Bursell, longtime police officer turned writer, who's written a number of novels and she's still doing the Clive Cussler Fargo series.
It's Jack DeBrule doing the May book, but I think Robin may have a book this fall. I'll have to check.
Yeah, she has a good question. She says, did you find it cathartic writing about your past job, although fictionally? And then she says, I was like you. I didn't write about police stuff to begin with because I lived it every day. But once I did start writing about it, it was very cathartic.
So the first thing I have to say is Robin may not remember me, but we ran into each other a long, long time ago, way before even my first book was published, when I was just sniffing around the writers' conferences and stuff and trying to figure things out. And she was so friendly and so kind and so sweet to me. So thank you, Robin. To this day, of course, I remember you. And that's a great question. Actually, I do find it cathartic, which is a little bit of a surprise, but yeah, it has been. Maybe because I'm retired, it just feels different.
Okay, so let's see. Arlene has a few more questions. And some of these are standard writing questions, like do you have a ritual or a routine when you write? And how do you transition from project to project? I mean, specifically, she says, well, how do you transition from writing your current published book to your next project, and what sustains you?
Terror sustains me that I'm gonna never get another contract again. Right?
Headline?
Shaking his head. Yeah, it's fear. And the other thing is, and this is gonna sound like really snotty or whatever, but I just have to tell the truth. You know, in my line of work, you juggle so many things, right? Like, and you just get used to it. And I did get used to like a really high tempo. Like I had to have a lot of inputs and I had to be juggling a lot of things at the same time. So, you know, I try very hard not to be real precious about my time or anything. Now that I'm retired, I'm becoming more precious about my time, where I like to get up first thing in the morning and start writing. But I used to pride myself before on that I could do anything at any time, right? I just to be as efficient as possible with my time. So, you know, if I had to write, I sit down and write. If I had to edit, I sit down and edit. If I had to do both at the same time, you know, I would try, do research. I'm just super efficient. So not very much help there, and not very friendly, I'm afraid. What about you, Michael? Are you good at that?
No, I don't know which specific area you're referring to, but no. I'm laughing because my wife has been reading your books for the last 3 weeks now. And she said just a few days ago, I find my wife to be intimidating, well, in so many ways, but in how organized she is. Her thought process, the way she approaches a day, a task, she has a plan and she executes on that plan. And she said, well, reading your book with this like note of envy, her mind is so organized. And I thought, okay, well, that is really, by my metric, that is some huge praise. So I just wanted to share that anecdote.
Tell her I'm very flattered. And I do know, I mean, yeah, that I'm pretty daunting in that way. It is slowing down. Like when I was in my 40s, I was probably frightening. I mean, people who worked for me would be frightened, you know, because I had very high expectations. I would be running like war cells and stuff, right? You don't get a lot of, there's no leeway for error and that kind of thing. But now I'm retired and I find my things fall out of my head a lot easier. And I probably should start writing things down more, you know, and I have to give my husband a lot of credit for putting up with me all these years. It's tough. It's tough. Yeah.
We all have supportive spouses, you know, you have to have one to do all this. Patrick, we probably have time for one more question.
Hey, yeah, I have a good one. Pat, who tunes into a lot of our programs, she says, do you have any thoughts about writing about the effects of misinformation? I mean, it's always been with us, but never so much as it is now.
Yes, I do. But it's actually, I don't know. I'd love to hear you guys' opinion. It's turning out to be a little bit of a hard sell. I actually wrote a pitch for a TV show on disinformation, like sort of like a Chernobyl version of what happened during the 2016 election. And the people who read the pitch liked it, but they were like, oh, people don't want to go through that again, or they think they know the story, or that sort of thing. But I would love to, because it's still with us. I mean, I did a big study on early in the coronavirus on the disinformation campaigns, you know, what conversations were going on. And then when we started seeing disinformation come in, it's going to be with us for a long time. And we all have to be much savvier consumers of information that we get on social platforms.
I think you're being upstaged.
I was the actual puppy, her collar of shame is right there. But, you know, actually, Alma, I do think that the ability to create avatars and so forth, you know, to create non-existent people for purposes of deception and disinformation is really terrifying. And I can't remember, or I wouldn't say if I can remember, but I just read a really frightening book. And that's the essence of the plot, is that much of the population of the book is not real, but you don't know that until you get to the end. And I think that is a very scary thing.
That sounds like a fascinating book. You'll have to send me the name. Unfortunately, we're
I
living.
do remember it now, but I'm not going to because I've just given away the plot. So I will tell you later. In any case, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much. Here, come on, puppy. Stick your head up there and say, hi.
Oh, what a
There she is. She's a really good puppy, but she hates it when she has this collar on. So she's like this all the time. So she's so ashamed. Little does she know, I don't know how to activate the radio signal that will zap her if she barks. So she's perfectly safe. In any case, what a joy it is to see you again. I remember our event for the Hunger Game, and we weren't able to get together for Titanic, but, or sorry, was that the actual title? I'm having a,
That's okay.
was,
I
right.
think of it the same way.
The joy of Zoom is that here we have Michael in Maine and you wherever you are, and Patrick in the back room of the bookstore, and me at home with the dog. And it's a lot of fun, even though it's frustrating not to be together with people. So I'm
It's
really
great to
grateful.
see you guys.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
was a real
Thank you
pleasure.
so
Thank
much.
you for
Thank
letting
you.
me be a part of it. And cheers. This is release day, right? This is pub day.
This is it. It's been crazy. Yeah.
Congratulations.
And thank you so much.
Oh, yes, you're a good girl. Right. So bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. There'll be a podcast of this in a day or two. And the video will stay on Facebook and Patrick will put it on YouTube. So if you've enjoyed this, recommend that your friends watch it because it will be there forever. And we do still have a few copies of Red Widow autographed. So you can still buy one. Night, everybody.
Thank you.